Hey, it's Brian here, and I want to teach you now how to set up an irrigation system at your place. Now, if you've ever looked at irrigation parts before and found it a bit overwhelming and not sure what to get, this video is going to take you step by step in getting the water from the tap to the pots and even setting up automated timers and everything there. So we're going to go through all the parts, and I'm going to try and explain it in a way that everybody can give this a go and nobody gets left behind. Now, first thing you're going to need is you're going to have a garden tap. Now, most garden taps in Australia will look like this one over here, and it's just a brass tap, and they usually have a 1-inch thread on the tap here. And so we're going to connect our pipe from that over to where your garden is. Now, the pipe that we use is usually this poly pipe here. Now, you can buy this from the Aussie Gardener store, and it comes in, I think it's a 25-metre roll. And the pipe that we're selling is 19 mil is the diameter of the pipe. Now, if you go to other stores, other hardwares, you'll see that there's different diameter pipes ranging from 13 mil, 19 mil, 25. Now, at Aussie Gardener, we're all about simplifying things. So what we've done is gone with the 19 mil pipe for everything. So there's no different size pipes because that will allow lots of water flow to get to the area where you're going to be watering. So just avoid using other pipe sizes and stick with the 19 mil. That means you can use 19 mil fittings with everything as well, and it just makes it a lot simpler. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from the tap over here, and I've got a basic setup happening on this board here. Now you can see that we're a long distance from here up to the tap. But that's okay because we're going to add a timer in and another thing, a pressure reducer in a bit later. But I just wanted to show you a basic setup. If you didn't have any timer or anything else, it would just simply be the poly pipe going up to the tap and connecting, going over to the area we want to water. And in this case, I've run 2 lines and I've put a T there to split it. Now, you mightn't have that. You might just have 1 line of pots that you need to be watering or 1 veggie bed. Just remember that whenever you do a join with the poly pipe or an elbow, you've got to go right angles with your pipe, or you've got to add a T. You've also got to add these things called ratchet clamps. And I'm just going to show you a close-up on those. There's our ratchet clamp there, and that goes onto our pipe here. And then we squeeze it, and I'll show you a bit later, and that holds it tightly on there so the actual pipe doesn't pop back off again. So we'll talk about that a bit more. So what you've got to work out first of all is how far away your growing area is from your tap. So generally what you do is just take some big stride paces with your feet, just walking to the area, and roughly each big pace is about 1 metre. And so let's say that you have your veggie garden and it's maybe 10 metres away from the tap. You're going to need at least 10 metres of pipe, plus you're going to need a bit of pipe that goes from the ground up to the tap. So maybe that's another metre. And then you'll need some pipe that runs along the side of your black geophelt planters or along the bed. So just pace it out roughly and then decide, okay, is a 25-metre roll going to be long enough? Now, in most cases, 25 is going to be enough, but you might need to get a couple of rolls and get a joiner. So when we're actually watering the plants, we use a product called an OctaSpray. And that's little devices that are down here. And we'll show one of these close up as well. So this is our OctaSpray here. You can see it's a spike or a peg that goes into the soil. And on the tap here, it has little holes around the edge, 8 little holes, and that's why we call it an OctaSpray. And you can adjust that. And the great thing about these is you can make it go from a small amount of watering this wide to very wide watering. And so it's very adjustable. And you can even turn it all the way and tighten it until it's completely off. So if you have a pot that it doesn't need to be watered, you don't need to pull the tube out or anything, you just turn this and totally turn the water off. And we might show some footage of how that's working in one of the geophelt planters. So you can see how when we adjust it, it spreads further to the side, and then we can make it narrow as well. It means you're wasting none of the water because you're feeding it directly to where the plants need it most. So we're going to be connecting those into our main tube, and we use what's called microtube to do that. And this is a 4 mil microtube. When you buy an OctaSpray off us, we provide it with 1 metre of the tube, and we provide you with all the parts you need, which is the little barb that goes into the main tube as well. So let's just go step by step from the tap over towards our veggie garden here. So first thing we've got to decide is, do we want to just connect this system straight to the tap, or do we want to have an automatic timer in place? Now, I really recommend you put a timer. It doesn't take much time each day for watering. So we can set the timer to come on for maybe 1 minute for every 24 hours. I found is generally a good amount for the black geopheld planters. But you might have to adjust that. If you're in a really dry area, you might need to do 3 minutes, for example, every 24 hours. During winter, I would cut that down to being maybe every 48 hours or every 72 hours that you do a bit of watering. How do you tell? You just go up to the soil and stick your finger in, and if it looks damp inside, then everything's good. But if it's starting to get dry when you stick your finger in, you'll know that you need to increase the amount of watering. We're really trying to simplify this system so anybody can do it. Now, if you ever go into an irrigation shop, there is hundreds and hundreds of parts, and it's mind-boggling. It's like a Lego store for grown-ups, I guess, because you can connect this to that, and it's just so many different things you can do. So we've tried to bring it back down to basics so that anyone can actually get this set up, probably in a weekend, no problem. So if we're going to use a timer, this is the one that we sell. It's a Holman brand. We looked at a lot of different timers and we found a lot of them were electronic displays that are a bit complicated to use. And so we picked this one because it's dead simple. It has 2 dials on there, and we'll just show that in the camera here. And so our left dial here determines how often you're going to water. So you can turn the dial and say, I want it to come on. Well, I gave the example of every 24 hours. So I'm going to turn it around here until we get to the pointer going to 24 hours. And so that we know the watering is going to come on in 24 hours time. And then I say, I want it to water for 1 minute. So on this right dial is how long it goes for, the duration. So it's got numbers 1, 3, 5, all the way up to 120 minutes. So in this case, I want to just put it on for 1 minute. So I'm going to turn the dial until the pointer goes over to the 1. And then to set this, to say I want it to start working now, I'm going to press and hold the enter button here in the center and hold it for 3 seconds. And what we should see is a light come on here just to confirm that that program has now been set. That's as hard as it is, very simple. Now, to actually determine what time of day you do this, the easiest way is to just go out there and set the timer at the same time that you want to actually be having it running. But if that's not convenient for you, let's say you wanted it to come on at 6 o'clock in the morning and you don't like getting up that early, in the instruction manual, there is a process you can do to actually change the start time earlier without actually having to get up. But I recommend just do it the once and it's all good. Now, what if you want to do some manual watering? Let's say that your plants need some extra watering and it's still a long while till the timer comes on. It's really simple. You turn the timer here and you just move it over to the on position, which is at the top of the dial over here. Now you're going to hear it make a noise, which is the solenoid that's inside is actually opening up to let the water through. So let's have a look. I'm going to switch it to the on position. So you can hear that noise, and if we had this connected to a tap, what you would see is the water flowing out the bottom here. So we know it's working. It's even got a feature where if we wanted to say, have it manually turn on and I want to be able to walk away and just run it for say 20 minutes or what's our time on here or 3 hours or 3 minutes and so on. So what we can do is we just put the left dial to the reset button, which is at the top here. And then we're going to turn this one here, this dial here, over to the amount of minutes we want it to go for. So 20 minutes is down the bottom. Sorry, I was getting a bit confused before with the other dial. So it's 20 minutes, so we'll turn it to 20 minutes. And what we should see is that the timer will turn on for 20 minutes and then shut itself off automatically. So you can read all about that in the instruction manual. It's very, very easy to use and a great way to have automatic irrigation so your plants don't get stressed. Because one of the problems with growing in pots is they can dry out. And so if a plant dries out, it starts to go, well, is my surroundings safe here? is this a good growing environment? And it starts to go into survival mode rather than into fully growing mode. So you may find that it doesn't produce, fruits well, or it doesn't produce roots well because it's starting to just try and survive. So you want to try and eliminate that stress by giving it regular watering each day. So I would recommend that you get one of these timers to make your system just fully automated. It makes it so much easier. So when the timer arrives, it's going to come in a box like this one here. And it's got these parts that you're seeing on this timer here in front of me. I'll just bring this in close to the camera there. So you can see it's got the adapters to connect it to the tap. And then down the bottom here, it's actually got an adapter to connect it to a hose. Now, we don't want to do that in this system because we want to connect it to the 19mm poly pipe I've been talking about. So I'm going to take this off here because we don't need that part. So we'll put that to the side. But we do need these other parts, and we're going to connect it up to our tap. So it's very simple. We just put it onto the tap, and this tap's a little bit wonky because it's only a little sample display. And I'm going to screw that onto the tap. Good. And then I'm going to rotate this around and make sure that it's all sitting very nice and neat. So now we've got that attached to our tap, so we've done that part. Now I've still got a gap here, and it's because in my sample system here, I've got another device I think that's important as well. In Australia, we have all different water pressures. So where I live, the water pressure is terrible. And so you turn on the tap, and if someone's having a shower at the same time, the shower starts to drop away. You'll know what I mean if you've got low water pressure. But you might have high water pressure, which is you turn on the tap and it just blasts out everywhere, and fittings keep popping off. So these sprinklers are designed to work at 100 kPa as our water pressure. And so we can use a pressure reducer, which is this device here. And essentially what's inside here is a spring, a very strong spring. So when the water pushes against that spring, it has to lose some of that pressure, and it comes out the other end at 100 kPa. So basically you might have 150 or 200 kPa at your tap, very high water pressure, but by the time it comes out, it'll be 100 kPa. So we're going to screw one of those onto there as well. Now this fitting here is a 3/4 inch wide fitting, and on the bottom of the timer, I know it's also 3/4 inch. And so we're going to screw those together. Just some of the basics with how they name all these fittings. Remember, the garden tap is a 1-inch fitting. I'm just going to use the Imperial system for this to simplify it, because most of these are still referring to Imperial. So it's a 1-inch system, and then it reduces down to a 3/4 inch at the bottom of the timer. And then we go into the reducer, which is also 3/4 inch. It's very simple. If you look at the shape of the fittings, this is classed as a female fitting, so that there's a hole in the center, whereas the male fitting is the bit that sticks out, just like it does on humans. And so we're going to screw that onto there. So we've got the female fitting going onto the male fitting. So now what we've got is a timer, and we've got a pressure reducer. So our next step is we're going to be connecting the poly pipe, the 19mm poly pipe, to get from the tap over to where we want to water. And we're going to need a fitting that adapts that screw thread onto the poly pipe. So in this case, it's going to take a couple of fittings to make this work. So this is the type of fitting we use, and it's called a nut and tail. And we use this to connect a threaded fitting, which means it's got a screw thread on it, onto the poly pipe, which is the 19mm. Okay, so that's called a nut and tail. The thing is though, the top of this is a 1-inch fitting here, whereas we know that coming out of the bottom of the pressure reducer is 3/4 inch. So we're going to have to use a reducing bush. I think it's called a tap adapter reducing bush, and that's going to look like this. So we're going to go put that into there, screw that on. So now we've got a thread in here that is 3/4 instead of being 1 inch, and we can now screw that onto our fitting over here. Now in my example one, I've already done that over here, so I'm just going to set that up. What I might do is actually screw the reducing. I'm just going to use the correct term so you can find these on the website. So the one that I'm using at the moment is called the Tap Adapter Reducing Bush 1 inch BSPM for male, going to the 3/4 BSPF for female. So now that we've taken it from 3/4 to 1 inch, now we can screw in the 1 inch to that one. So we'll put that together and we'll just screw that on. Okay, so we've screwed that together and now we're connected into the poly pipe. But how do we actually connect that into the poly pipe? I'll show you the tricks to doing that. So this is a piece of poly pipe here, and you're going to need to cut the poly pipe. So we use another tool here, which is our poly pipe cutter, which also doubles as a tool for punching holes in the pipe for the microtube later on. So it's very simple to use this tool. Highly recommend getting one. You just slot it into here and then you squeeze it together. Makes a nice click sound and it cuts the pipe for you. So very simple to do. And in this case, we were attaching this fitting here into the poly pipe. Now the poly pipe's quite stiff, and so what we need to do is soften that a bit. Now the easiest way to do this is to have a thermos with you. So I've got a little thermos here with hot water in it. Whoop. And I'm just going to stick the poly pipe for maybe 10 seconds into that. Just to soften it up. And so now the end is really pliable, easy to work with. And then I'm just going to push that onto there. Now, if you happen to have one of these little devices, it's like a little bit of a blowtorch, you can use that to heat it, but just be careful you don't actually melt all the pipe doing that as well. So with this pipe, it's really important that we then put a ratchet clamp, otherwise the pipe is going to pop back off again later, especially on hot days where the pipe gets soft again. So we grab one of our ratchet clamps. I'm just twisting it like this so that I can open it up. There it is there. And I'm going to put this over the join that we just did. I'm going to squeeze it together with my hands. First of all, my fingers, you can hear that clicking sound. And then we're going to go and tighten that up with a pair of multi-grips, which you'll need. So all I'm doing is just squeezing it, and you'll hear it click, click, click until it won't click anymore. So now we have a really tight fitting now, that won't come off there. So that's what I did on this sample here, is I'd already used a ratchet clamp and tightened all that together. Now I've come down the pipe vertically and I need to go down to ground level and go across. So I'm going to use an elbow to do that. So here's our elbow. Now you're going to need to use 2 ratchet clamps on this elbow. So you're going to have a ratchet clamp here and a ratchet clamp here. And of course, you just stick it into the hot water like we did before. Here's one I've already assembled. So you can see there's our elbow with the ratchet clamps on either side there. So now we've got the pipe going down to the ground. We've got an elbow. We're going to run a long pipe, usually over to wherever our growing area is. We may need to put a T in there if we need to split it, if you've got 2 rows of plants, or we may need to put some other elbows. But it's the same process over and over again, and it's not too hard to do. So now we've got our pipe right beside where our growing area is. The problem is the pipe's a bit stiff. So generally when you're working with a poly pipe, what you should do is unroll the roll and lay it out in the sun maybe for an hour before you go to use it. And that will get rid of all the circular curls in it. You'll find it a lot easier to work with. But you also might need to use some pegs. So we've got some pegs on our website that you can get as well. And these are designed to be able to peg the actual pipe down into the soil. Makes it very easy to do and keeps it very neat as well. Now we've got it pegged down. We now need to attach some of the OctaSprays. So when you receive the OctaSprays, you're going to receive the 1 meter of microtube here. and you're going to receive this little device here. I think it's called a barb that goes onto the end. And this is the part that's going to connect into the actual main tube here. Now, I haven't got one. I should have had it set up here. But when you receive the OctaSpray, the barb will be attached to the side of here. And you just twist and break it off. And then you can heat the end of the tube up, just sticking it in the hot water, and then push the barb into it. Now, if we have a look at the shape of the barb here, I'll just put my hand behind it. The barb has one end that's pointed. So if we have a look at that, you can see it's got a sharp point on it here. That pointed side is the one that's going to go into the main pipe, whereas the other end, it has a flat end on it. Unfortunately, I can't take it off. I don't think I can get it off because it's quite stiff to get them off. But you'll see what I mean. If you break the barb off, one side's pointed, that's the bit that's sharp. It's going to go into our main poly pipe. So we'll go over to our poly pipe. I'm going to use my sample piece here, and we're going to punch a hole into it. And we're going to use this tool again. Now, if you have a look at how this tool works, is that it has two openings there. This one here is for cutting. Don't stick your finger in it like I'm doing at the moment. It looks like a torture device. So that's for cutting the pipe. And this one here is for punching a hole in the pipe. So we're going to use the first hole, this one here, to do that. And you just sit it on there and you just press them together and you'll hear a pop like that. And it's punched a perfect sized hole, a bit hard to see, but you can see there's the hole there, and that's what the poly tube, the micro tube, is going to go into. Now, just a little tip, if you've left your poly pipe out in the sun and it's a very warm day, the pipe becomes so soft that this actually won't work very well. And so I just found that what I needed to do was just leave the pipe for a bit longer until it was cooling off a bit, maybe later in the afternoon, because it needs to actually be able to punch it. And if the pipe is too soft and hot, it'll just kind of squish the pipe. So if you're finding it's not working, that's why. All right, so we've punched a hole in there. Now we'll get our OctaSpray here, our micro tube, and the little barb on the end, and we're just going to push that into there. And you can hear it pops in really nicely. Now, you can punch a hole in this tube without using one of these tools, but just from experience, you end up having leaking joints because it's not quite the right size. It's hard to get them in. As soon as I used this, I was saying, I wish I had bought this years ago. It's such a simple, it's not too expensive either. Fantastic tool to be using. So now we've put our little OctaSpray and it's connected up. And so then we can push that into our plant pot and then adjust the head so that it adjusts how wide the watering is. So as I explained before, if you turn it anti-clockwise, it'll make the watering go out wider. From memory, it goes out about probably 50 centimeters wide diameter is about the maximum. So if you've got plants growing in a geofelt planter, which is 55 centimeters wide, your plants are going to be in from the edge, aren't they? So you don't want the water going out near the edge because that's going to get wasted. You want it to go just inside your plants. So for example, if you had a row of lettuce coming around the edge here, you would adjust this so the water just hits to the edge underneath the lettuce there, and it feeds the roots really well. So, and then if you don't need it, remember, you can just turn it all the way clockwise until it goes totally off. So that basically is our system. We've run the water over to there, we've connected the micro tube to it, and now we've got water coming from the tap. There's one more thing we need to do. At the end of the pipe, usually you'll have some kind of end cap. Now there is irrigation supply end caps you can get, but I found in our irrigation systems it was better to not use an end cap because they're very difficult to get on and off usually. So instead what I do is I put a flush valve, and essentially it's a tap. So that's this green tap here. And what that allows me to do is I can flush the system out. So I can turn the water on, run water through it, turn this tap, and then water will flow out of there. Why is that important is because sometimes you get sediment, dirt, especially maybe if you're using tank water or, you occasionally get dirt in the line, or you've got little bits of plastic or bugs or whatever. And so this just allows the water to flush out. And it's good just to do that probably every month or two, just to flush the line and get sediment out of the line. Because if there is sediment in there, it will actually start to block your OctaSprays and they won't work. So I recommend adding that to the line. You can also get these galvanized kind of clips that are usually used for conduit, electrical conduit. So if you had to run some tubing along, say, a wall and you couldn't bury it in the ground, you might want to attach it like that. I'm just thinking what else is there. Okay, there's a few other little parts that we need to look at. Sometimes you might have the irrigation system and you don't want to run the poly pipe from your tap over to where your garden is. You might want to just use a hose, and so that you can lift the hose up and be able to roll it up and get it out of the way. So you use one of these click-on fittings. Now what this has is at one end, this has the 19mm end which goes into the poly pipe, and then if I turn it around, this end has the typical click-on fitting that we use for all of our garden hoses. And it just means you can connect it up to the 19mm pipe to do that. So in my case, I'm installing it in a more permanent way because I want to bury the poly tube in the ground so nobody can see it. And so I'm not going to use a hose, but you might maybe initially want to connect a hose up to do it that way. Just keep in mind, if you do have this end open here, sitting on the ground, you will probably get ants and bugs that will crawl into this. And so it's important that when you connect the hose up, that you turn the flush valve on just to release the water back out again and get the bugs out of the system so it doesn't get all clogged up. Now, have I missed anything? I think I've covered just about anything of how to set this up, and hopefully you're feeling a lot more confident. So as a basic summary is you're going to be taking water from your tap over to your pots. You need to work out how many meters you need to measure of the poly pipe. Just pace it out. It doesn't need to be exact as long as you've got enough, maybe with a 25-meter roll. In most cases, that's going to be very suitable. You need to decide whether you want to automate your system, and that's going to require getting a timer, and I recommend getting this timer. Now, the particular one that we've chosen here is very, very simple to use. It also works on low pressure systems and high pressure systems. So it will work on normal garden taps, but let's say that you've got a rainwater tank or you've got a gravity feed system and the water pressure is lower. Other irrigation timers won't work. They need a certain amount of pressure to shut it on and off. This particular one will work in normal garden taps as well as low pressure systems, which is why we've gone for that. We then take the water through. We want to reduce the pressure. In my house, I probably don't need to reduce the pressure because our pressure is so low already. You will generally know if you have low water pressure by what I described before about the showers and everything else. So if you, for everyone else, I'd recommend you get the pressure reducer and connect it. You're going to need to have the adapter we talked about before, which is called the, I'll get the right one, the tap adapter reducing bush, which is going to go from the 3/4 inch on the pressure reducer into the 1 inch of the nut and tail. You're going to need to have the nut and tail that connects it to the poly pipe. You're going to need to have lots of the ratchet clamps. So every fitting is going to need one at every point that it connects to a pipe. If you have an elbow, you're going to need 2 ratchet clamps and so on. If you have a T fitting, you're going to need 3 ratchet clamps. On our website, we've tried to make it, you know, I'm not sure what's, we just tried to dumb it down. So we go, when you buy the T fitting, it says, don't forget to buy 3 ratchet clamps, because it's so frustrating if you get it home and you can't put it all together again. So there's one other thing that I haven't mentioned, and that is this little funny product, and this is called goof plugs. And this is for when you've punched a hole in your poly pipe and then decided later that I don't need that hole there anymore. And so these are just a little tiny plug that you're just going to push into the pipe. Very hard to show because it's only tiny. So we just push that into the pipe. I'll see if I've got, there's a hole in this pipe here, and I'm just going to push that in. Whoop, I've dropped it. The goof plugs are probably not too essential because you can adjust the OctaSpray down to kind of 0 water coming out anyway. So you can see there's a goof plug filling that hole there. And our Timer has actually just turned off the water again. Remember before I set it to manually go on for 20 minutes? And so I've been obviously talking for 20 minutes and it's actually shut the water off. So that's the whole system. We've got all these available on our website. If you've got any questions, just send us a chat message on the website or an email or give us a call. Hopefully there's enough information though in this video that you're going to feel confident to be able to set this up at your home. So give it a go. It certainly makes growing a lot easier just having regular watering that's automated and the plants grow happy and strong.